Her face turns evil. Her eyes roll into the back of her head. Her body contorts into grotesque and impossible positions. She says horrible, disgusting things. Looks like we're talking about possession films. It's the Horror Movie Syllabus. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. I'm Professor Victor, and I'll be leading you through our exploration of the interesting, must-see, essential modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, please check out the introduction video. I'll leave a link in the description below, but for now, let's go ahead and get right into it. Today we're talking about possession films, and as you can tell from my cold open, they tend to be very formulaic, and there's a reason for that we're going to explain in just a few minutes. Now, for those of you that have looked at the Horror Movie Syllabus before, which can be found at thehorrormoviesyllabus.com, again, I'll put a link in the description below, you'll see that the possession subgenre is separate from the religion subgenre, even though most possession films tend to be pretty intertwined with religion, particularly Catholicism. Part of why I separated these into two subgenres is that I wanted to be able to talk about other religion movies that didn't have anything to do with possession. There's a few good ones out there, and when we get to that subgenre, you'll see what I'm talking about. But the other reason I wanted to separate them is because I do think that the possession subgenre is a very specific subgenre. As fans of this subgenre, we expect certain things to happen in a movie, and for the most part, movies will deliver. We're going to look at 3 just such movies right now, and they're going to be separated into the usual categories of undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate. In this case, those 3 delineations will indicate the order of scariness, with the first movie being the least scary, and the last movie being by far the most scary. The first movie we're going to talk about today, the undergraduate film, is The Exorcism of Emily Rose. This movie tells the supposedly true story of a young girl possessed by a demon, the subsequent exorcism of that demon, and the fallout from those events. Now, I say supposedly based on a true story, but unlike most movies in the horror genre who use that moniker, this one actually does have basis in true events. But it's not so much the demonic events that are the true part, as it is the courtroom trial that happened after the fact. And that's maybe one of the greatest strengths of this movie. It's really more of a courtroom drama than it is a horror film. And I found that the courtroom scenes were probably the most interesting parts of the movie to me. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that these horror films about possession tend to be a little formulaic. Well, The Exorcism of Emily Rose kind of defeats that by going into the courtroom aspect of this, which most other horror films do not do. It seems like a lot of people enjoy this film. I've seen a lot of people call it one of their favorite films or putting it on a lot of their best of lists. And I can understand why. I think it's a very good film. I do think that if you're expecting something really scary, though, you might be a little disappointed by this one. Again, it really comes off more like a drama than it does like a horror film. That said, I definitely think you should see it. It's really good. In particular, Jennifer Carpenter, who's also in the show Dexter, is great as the titular Emily Rose. She's really compelling. She puts in a great performance. I really love her in the film. Definitely go ahead and check this one out. The second film we're going to be talking about today, our graduate level possession film, is The Last Exorcism. Now, The Last Exorcism can be a little bit polarizing as a film. It's a found footage film, and already off the bat, people are going to have issues with found footage. Some people love it, some people hate it. And you'll notice that I didn't put this in the found footage subgenre of horror because I really think that the possession angle is the more interesting aspect of this film. In short, the movie's about a charlatan preacher who performs exorcisms, but they're basically frauds, and he decides to come clean in a documentary, only when he does his one last exorcism, turns out it's not a fraud after all. The movie's really good, in no small part because the performances are very, very believable. The special effects work really well, and even though the ending of it is not 100% great, it's better than most found footage endings, so I'll give it that. It did have one sequel. It's a forgettable sequel, as evidenced by the fact that I don't actually remember what it's about. Most people don't like it. It's not generally considered to be very good, so you can maybe skip that, but definitely see the first one. It's really good. It's worth your time, for sure. And our final film for the possession subgenre, our postgraduate film, is, of course, The Exorcist. Now, horror fans, new and old, are probably sick of hearing about The Exorcist. It's often billed as one of the greatest horror films of all time, if not the greatest, but there's a reason for that, and it's that it's extremely good. In fact, we were talking earlier about all these possession horror tropes, the girl twisted up into impossible positions, and her eyes rolling back and talking in a weird voice. All of this stuff comes from The Exorcist. In fact, pretty much every horror possession film that you see owes something to The Exorcist. That is what we expect in a possession horror film now. The Exorcist basically defined the genre. A brief summary of the film's plot in case you don't know. A young girl gets possessed by a demon. A couple of Catholic priests try to exorcise the demon out of her. I won't say anything more than that, even though pop culture has probably spoiled several scenes in the movie to you. If you somehow manage to not be spoiled, I certainly don't want to be the person who spoils it for you. Now, The Exorcist came out in the early 1970s, so for some of you younger viewers, the pacing is going to be a little bit unusual. It's going to feel a little slow, especially the beginning. But trust me, stick with it. It does pick up, it does deliver. In fact, I'm really impressed by how much this movie holds up overall. I was watching a YouTube video of two guys called Cinema Rules who like to react to classic horror films, and they reacted to The Exorcist. And their attitude at the beginning of the film was, yeah, we've heard all about this movie, it's probably not as great as people think. But by the end, they were definitely in on this movie. All of the classic moments, all of the big scares, everything seemed to hit for them just right. It really does hold up. Now, is it the scariest horror movie ever made? I don't know about that. I kind of think it's one of the scariest movies ever made, but I think it all depends on what scares you. The key to The Exorcist horror is really the unsettling feeling that you get watching it. If you can really absorb the gravity of the situation of this young girl being tormented by this demon, being made to do perverse and horrific things, it's really, really unsettling. It's not so much boo scares or jump scares, although there are a few of those in the movie as well. It really is that unsettling feeling of your body being violated in such a way, or if you're a mother, watching your child go through something and not being able to help at all. If you're somebody who's a person of faith, watching the battle of good and evil is something that can really resonate with you. So there's a way that this movie can hit on a lot of different levels. I can't praise it enough. It really is a must-see horror film. It is an essential piece of your horror knowledge. You have to check it out if you haven't seen it before. But be forewarned, it really is much more intense than you would think a movie from the early 70s would be. So definitely check it out. Don't say I didn't warn you about it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I really hope you guys like it because I love it and I think it is one of the most important horror films of all time. So those are our 3 picks for the possession subgenre, but if you like this subgenre, let me give you a few extra credit films that you can check out. The first one I want to talk about is a movie called Fallen, starring Denzel Washington. And this movie it's just a lot of fun. It's kind of more of a thriller than a horror film, but it's got the supernatural aspect to it that really works. Denzel is always great, so he's fun to watch in this movie. It's got some great use of a Rolling Stones song in it. I really like that film. It's not a legendary film by any stretch of the imagination, but I find it to be very fun. The next extra credit movie I'll mention is called The Rite. It's a movie where Anthony Hopkins plays a Catholic priest dealing with demonic possessions. It's something of a cult classic. It's not one of my favorite movies, but I do think it's good. There's a lot of people who really love it, though. It's definitely worth checking out. And the last extra credit movie I'm going to mention to you is called The Devil Inside. It's another found footage horror movie about possession, and I can already hear horror fans freaking out about this. Let me be clear. The reason why I'm mentioning this movie is not particularly because it's good. It's because it's kind of infamous. And for those of you who've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Without giving too much away, it has maybe one of the worst endings in horror movie history. It's really frustrating. It literally just references a website at the end. I'm spoiling it for you now, but who cares? It's a terrible movie, and it's actually not bad until you get to the ending, and it just ends and gives you a website to go and look for more information, and the website's not even active anymore. So if you watch this movie, prepare to be extremely disappointed in it, but I mention it because it's so well known for being disappointing that I kind of wanted to give you new horror fans a bit of a heads up about it. It really is so notorious for being dissatisfying that I wanted to mention it here. And if you don't believe me, check it out for yourself and let us all know in the comments below just how disappointed you actually were in it. And if you can defend the movie in the comments, by all means do. Nobody be mean to anybody who tries to defend this movie. I genuinely want to see how they try to defend the movie. So everybody be nice to them. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. That's our take on all of the possession subgenre of horror. Thank you guys for attending. Please don't be afraid to put other suggestions of possession horror films in the comments below. And for now, class dismissed.